One of today's most important challenges is the decarbonisation of the economy. This will require huge changes in little more than a single generation and will demand innovative solutions, technologies, and policies. Hydrogen will play a crucial role in making this fundamental change to our energy systems. A globalized hydrogen economy could play a major role in preventing the climate emergency from becoming a catastrophic reality for the next generations.
Hydrogen. It's light, it's energy dense, it's storable, and it produces no direct greenhouse gas emissions, which of course is why it is attracting enormous interest on the part of governments and business. Does the balance of opportunities and challenges justify all the high hopes? Our title is At the Dawn of the Hydrogen Economy, and we have brought together a fantastic international panel representing countries with big hydrogen ambitions. In just a moment, I will welcome our speakers, but I would like to get your take on our audience poll, which is, will hydrogen become the bulk energy carrier of the future? And the voting has begun, and as you can see at the moment, the yeses are definitely in the majority, but we want to keep those votes coming in for a while, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're a registered user, please go to the Slido window there on your screen on this stream and let us know what you think. Will hydrogen become the bulk energy carrier of the future? And now it is my pleasure to introduce our great international panel, and then we'll come back to that graphic that we have for you. And I'm just going to, as always, keep the introductions really brief to try to maximize our time for discussion. So we begin with Juan Carlos Llobet. He is Energy Minister for Chile, which has set itself the target of becoming one of the world's leading exporters of green hydrogen by 2030. Welcome to you, sir. Great to have you with us. Colombia is joining forces with Chile and ratcheting up its own hydrogen goals. We're very pleased to have with us Diego Mesa. He is Colombia's Minister of Mines and Energy. Great that you could also be with us on this panel. Then I'm also very pleased to welcome Dan Jørgensen. He is Minister for Climate, Energy and Utilities for Denmark. Europe's largest green hydrogen facility is planned for the Danish North Sea coast. Also, very, very great to be joined by João Galamba. He is Deputy Minister and Secretary of State for Energy from Portugal, which plans to start producing green hydrogen by the end of next year, with also the aim of becoming a major energy exporter. And finally, Kirsten Berge is with us. She is Director for Energy and Climate Change in the Scottish Government. Scotland is putting massive resources into a strategy that will see it generate 5 gigawatts of green hydrogen by 2030. And already hundreds of Scottish homes are going to be the first in the world to use entirely green hydrogen for heating and cooking. So as I said, all of our speakers with big ambitions in the new hydrogen economy. We'll hear more after we take another look at that audience poll that we had there. And the voting seems to have stopped, and in fact, a good 2/3 of those who answered said hydrogen will indeed become the bulk energy carrier of the future. And a little bit later on, we're going to do a second poll with our audience. But first of all, let me ask all of our panelists to get us started with your headlines-only version of hydrogen's main advantages, but also the challenges. And I say headline only because, as always, in view of our very tight schedule, we are looking for about 2 minutes per speaker for this first round. So I will begin, if I may, with Juan Carlos Llobet.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm happy with the results of the poll. I tend to agree with the results. In Chile, we have an enormous renewable energy potential. So we're working aggressively to develop a strong green hydrogen industry. We're going to use our renewable energy potential to produce clean electricity with the sun, with the wind, to be a leading exporter of green hydrogen to the world, and also to achieve our own carbon neutrality goals. So the two main opportunities, I would say. First is to decarbonize sectors of the economy that are hard to electrify, right? We're going to use cleaner electricity in many areas, but there are some areas in which we need other solutions. And green hydrogen will play an essential role there. And that is, for example, steel, cement, and also heavyweight transportation, right? So that is, I think, the first opportunity. In our numbers, green hydrogen will contribute with approximately 25% of our CO2 reductions by 2050. And I think the second opportunity for us is to take advantage of our enormous renewable resources to export those resources to the world through green hydrogen and its derivatives to contribute to other countries' carbon neutrality goals, and also to develop infrastructure, create jobs, and help the recovery in areas of our country that have those natural resources but don't have necessarily very strong economies today. I think the two main challenges, first one is to avoid partial solutions. We really need to make sure that the whole chain of production of green hydrogen, from the electricity generation to the end consumer, it's really green, right? We don't want people to talk about green hydrogen, but we need to be sure that it's green from the beginning to the end, so we make sure that it makes the contribution we expect it to make. And I think the second challenge is scale. We need to reduce the cost of producing and transporting green hydrogen, and to do that, we need to scale up production and accelerate the process of developing new technologies to storage green hydrogen and then to move it around. So I think those are the two main opportunities and the two main challenges.
Thank you very much. And we will certainly return to some of those points a little bit later on. Ladies and gentlemen, before I move to our next speaker, may I just remind you that we would be very eager to hear your questions to our panel. And all registered users can send us questions via the chat function on our live stream. So please do that. And I'll go now to Minister Mesa also for that headline version of the biggest opportunities, but also the biggest challenges.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be in this panel. So talking about opportunities, I think the greatest opportunities obviously are for climate change and to achieve that goal to get to net zero by 2050. From a country such as Colombia, that is a middle-income country, the biggest opportunities arise from our natural endowment in all the ingredients that are needed to produce green hydrogen. There's a country that is extremely rich in water resources. We're the fifth country with the largest renewable water resources in the world. We also have significant potential to produce energy from solar and wind, and we are developing these technologies very quickly. We're growing from less than 1% of our power matrix made up of solar and wind to more than 12% in just a 4-year period. And so I think there's a great opportunity for countries like Colombia to become exporters of clean energy.
Can you hear me? I can't hear Melinda.
Thank you.
I think for the challenges are mostly on capital investment, infrastructure, and logistics to be able to distribute this clean source of energy, which could be used also for many different applications, including storage, transportation, obviously in the industrial sector. So we need to make sure that we reconvert some of the infrastructure that already is in place in many countries to be able to have trade in hydrogen, in green hydrogen, that's able to reach especially most of the industrialized countries around the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'll move along now to Minister Jørgensen from Denmark. Please, again, that headline version, challenges and opportunities. Perhaps you are on mute, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let me start with the positive side, the opportunities. Basically, I think there are two of them. One is that we will now have a possibility to use renewables in part of our energy systems where it's not possible today. That's maritime transport, that's aviation, heavy road transport. I mean, it sounds almost like science fiction to most people, I think, but today actually it's basically just science. We can take the energy from the wind, harvest the energy from the wind, make it into hydrogen, add some carbon, and then fly a plane on the e-fuels made from that. That's extraordinary. Second big thing is that with wind, for instance, and also other types of renewables, we are dependent on the weather. So we need a way of storing the energy. And here, of course, hydrogen is exactly that possibility. Now, on the challenges, basically, it's already been said, we need more scale. So need technology development. This will also bring down costs. Connected to this is also that the energy loss in the transformation to hydrogen is, and again from hydrogen to other fuels, is still too big. So when we bring that down, the cost will also go down and the scale will also go up. So it's all interconnected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned those transport sectors. In fact, if I'm not incorrect, I believe that you are planning what will be the world's largest hydrogen-powered ferry. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, yes, we have actually the big Danish maritime conglomerate Maersk is now a part of a collaboration that will help create new fuels based on PTX that can serve globally. But they are also working very closely together with the SAS, the Danish aviation company, and actually the largest project we have now on PTX will be making fertilizer for the agricultural sector, and they plan a project that will save the planet from 1.5 million tons of CO2 every year by making ammonia via PTX.
Thank you for that addition. Let me go now to Deputy Minister Galamba from Portugal for the same answer as to the challenges and opportunities. Deputy Minister, can you hear us? Oh, he's frozen. Okay, we will go to Scotland and we will come back to Portugal. So let me go then to Kersti Berge, again, with that same question, challenges, opportunities, how you see it.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Can I check that you can hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Great. So in terms of opportunities, it's clear that hydrogen a really important role in our energy transition to net zero, as a number of ministers have already said. And it's also an important component of our green recovery from the crisis that COVID has caused. Scotland's vision for hydrogen is unashamedly ambitious, and that ambition will need all of us here today to work together to realise it. We set out our hydrogen policy statement just before Christmas, and in that we were clear we wanted Scotland to become a hydrogen nation and a strong international partner in the production of sustainable hydrogen. So our aim is to generate 5 gigawatts capacity of generation of renewable and low carbon hydrogen by 2030, which is an ambitious target. Supported by a strong track record of world-leading hydrogen demonstration projects and maximising the opportunities presented by our extensive natural resources, our existing infrastructure in Scotland and our skilled workforce, our intention is for Scotland to become a producer of lowest cost hydrogen in Europe by 2045. While Scotland's no longer a member of the European Union, we are keen and ready to work with EU partners as well as others to overcome some of the challenges of safe, rapid and cost-effective deployment that a number of the ministers have already spoken about. Scotland has the potential to produce, firstly, large-scale blue hydrogen, but more importantly, internationally, significant quantities of green hydrogen for export from our offshore and onshore wind resource. In Scotland, we have an estimated 25% of all of Europe's offshore wind resource, and we've got the largest seascape for future development, so huge potential for green hydrogen today. And as we work together, one of the challenges for all of us will be to improve our understanding of the global nature and supply and demand for hydrogen. From this perspective, we're very well placed in terms of proximity and infrastructure connectivity to a number of other European nations that are unlikely to be able to produce sufficient hydrogen for their own decarbonisation. The last thing I wanted to say, and I have to say that because I'm sitting here in Glasgow, is that later this year, Glasgow will, of course, host COP26, the UN conference, which promises to be the most significant climate change summit since the Paris conference 5 years ago. And this is a huge opportunity for us to progress towards our net zero ambitions, but also, I think, to work very actively and collectively on the huge opportunity that hydrogen presents us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that, and exciting to be there in Glasgow in the run-up to COP26. So let me go now back to Deputy Minister Galamba. I hope that you can see and hear us.
Yes.
And we can see and hear you. Great. So again, this is still that first question, challenges and opportunities, the headline view, and then we're going to dig a bit deeper on some of the challenges.
Okay, well, the opportunities have already been mentioned. We believe that the huge momentum for renewables present us all with an opportunity to go deeper in terms of decarbonization, and green hydrogen for Portugal's strategy is a perfect complement to our main electrification strategy. We want to leverage our very competitive resources. Portugal is blessed with a huge solar resource and wind resource also. So the two combined give Portugal a significant edge in terms of its competitiveness in renewables in general and in hydrogen in particular. We've already changed the Portuguese legal and regulatory framework to allow renewable gases and hydrogen in particular to enter our energy system. We've already changed the law to allow the guarantees of origin, initially only for electricity, to broaden into renewable gases. And we are currently in Portugal preparing our first hydrogen auction to support end users. We will do an auction, a carbon CFD, that will basically pay the difference between existing carbon prices in international markets and that theoretical carbon price that will make hydrogen usage in whatever form commercially viable. So we are preparing it, and we want to launch our first hydrogen to provide support to decarbonize industry and transportation this year. So in Portugal, we believe that we have the right framework at the moment to kickstart all of this. So we have the legal and regulatory framework. We have the CAPEX support instruments to provide support for investment, and we are currently developing the OPEX instrument to support end users that want to switch to hydrogen or hydrogen-related products. Challenges. The challenges, I believe, are one that was already mentioned. One of the challenges is scaling up. There are huge advantages in terms of costs, which are the main barrier to adoption of green hydrogen, are costs. So scaling up is crucial, but we believe that the main challenge is collaboration. We are here in a panel with Chile, Colombia, Denmark, Scotland, and Portugal. And the opportunity for hydrogen is so vast that we're actually not competing against each other. We must collaborate, because either we succeed collectively or we fail individually. This is a very complex market that has to be tackled simultaneously from the supply and demand side, and that can only be done nationally through strong collaboration, but mainly international through strong collaboration and partnerships between governments, international institutions, and cross-border partnerships around specific projects. We believe that this is the main challenge, to look at an area that has been competitive from the start and look at it more from the angle of collaboration. So this is, from our perspective, the main challenge, but we believe that we have the conditions to tackle it and to overcome it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in fact, when I was researching this panel, I did encounter a number of collaborations just amongst yourselves, Chile and Colombia, as I mentioned at the outset, but also Denmark. I believe that ferry I mentioned, you're collaborating with Norway, if I'm not mistaken. So clearly a lot going on in that space. I'd like to drill deeper on a few of the challenges that you have all mentioned, and also some of them being brought up by the audience in questions. So I'm just going to put a few things out there, and whoever wants to speak to it, just give me a hand signal if you would. That way we get to make this last panel a bit more interactive, even though we're virtual. So one of the things that is often said is that the development of infrastructure has to proceed much more quickly than it is doing right now. And I have an audience question that's come in that says, large-scale storage of green hydrogen must be addressed since production and usage timelines are not aligned. How would you solve this? Large-scale storage. Who would like to speak to that? Nobody? No takers? Okay, please. Deputy Minister Galamba, please take it away.
Yes, we are currently addressing that specific challenge in terms of grid injection, because the production production rhythm and the injection rhythm cannot be the same. You have to have a permanent flow, so we were addressing that issue. The way that we are addressing is to try to socialize the investment costs necessary for storage. So joining several projects and ensuring that the storage investments are shared. Also, Portugal has salt caverns that are currently used to store natural gas, and we plan it in our law to evolve gradually. Of course, it will not be a sudden switch, but we've included those assets as part of our natural gas system that will gradually evolve to store green hydrogen. That's the approach that we're taking at the moment.
Thank you very much. Another question that comes up frequently is the question of standards, because of course green hydrogen is only as green as the power source that is used to make it. So one of you or a couple of you did mention the need for standards. I see Minister Jørgensen raising his hand. And I also see Minister Hobe. I'm sorry, I'm probably not saying your name correctly, but I'll let the two of you speak to that. Maybe Minister Jørgensen first, and then we'll go to Chile. I think you're on mute again, dear sir.
Yes, I do think that is a key question, and unfortunately, it's also something that the European Union will be dealing with in the near future. The European Commission, as you probably know, has stated that they will put forward a Fit for 55 package later this year. How do we achieve the 55% reduction in 2030 that we've decided? And a part of that is really how do we facilitate the transformation into a hydrogen economy? And part of that then is how do we define the different types, and which types are we then willing to subsidize, which should we maybe not subsidize so much? And I think that is a very necessary first step.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you, you say within Europe, but do we actually need international standards on this to ensure some kind of a level playing field?
Well, in the perfect world, we would have international standards, but in the perfect world, we will also have a global carbon tax or other sort of pricing mechanism. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend going down that way, though, because I don't think it's feasible to achieve that within the next couple of years, which is when we need it. So maybe it's a good idea if we try and set standards in Europe, other countries can collaborate in their region to do the same, and then hopefully then later maybe we can see whether or not we can make that interact with each other.
Thank you very much. And we'll go now to Chile and then Colombia. And I see that Portugal would like to weigh in again as well. So first of all, to you, Minister Robé, would you tell me one time how to say your name, please, so that I say it right?
It's French. It's Robé.
Oh, okay. That makes it easy. That makes it easier. Thank you.
Yeah. You can swallow the T. So basically, I think international standards would be ideal to have, right? The more common standards we have, the faster we can develop this industry, and the faster we can allow technology that is developed in one location to be used in different locations. But as it was said, there's a trade-off there as well, right? Because it will take time to develop common standards all over the world. So there's kind of a trade-off there, but I think this is an area in which international collaboration can play a key role. We are a small country. What we did is we looked at what different countries or regions are working on. We analyzed what we thought was the best standard, and then we're trying to go after that. But I think collaboration here it's essential to accelerate the spread of technology and the adoption of these new fuel, let's say, in different countries quickly.
Thank you very much. And I'll move over to Minister Mesa from Colombia.
Thank you. No, I fully agree on the need to collaborate in order to have international standards that become the norm. And I think one of the first issues we need to tackle is the so-called guarantee of origin or certificate of origin for green hydrogen. Because as you said, the green hydrogen, the color of the hydrogen will depend on how green or how clean your power matrix is. And I think here we need to make sure that we can trade hydrogen that we could establish all the links in the chain to make sure that it's green. And we need also to track CO2 emissions from the production of hydrogen use. So this will help us internationally have an agreement. And I think that's why, countries like Colombia and like Chile, in which we're working towards a cleaner energy system, could take advantage. In Colombia, for example, we have more than 70% of our power matrix that is clean because we depend heavily on hydro generation. And now with the incorporation of variable renewable energy, we're getting closer to 80 or 90% of our matrix. So guarantee of origin, I think, is key, and we need to collaborate to have international standards along those lines.
Thank you very much. And let me go now to Portugal. And if you care to speak to it, I would be very interested to know who can drive this standard setting. How do we make that happen?
Willing nations that have an interest in developing this market. But I have to say that we have to work with what we have. And following the intervention by the Danish minister, what Portugal has done in its law regarding guarantees of origin, it's basically to use the certification that there is currently being developed by a joint venture between the industry and the European Commission, the fuel cell hydrogen joint undertaking. It was the standard that was available. It is a European standard still being developed, and that's what we used because that's what we had. But we are, of course, very committed to working with other countries to work towards international standards. But first, we started with what we have, which is the beginning of a certification in Europe. That's what we had, that's what we used, because we wanted to have something in a Portuguese law that we could start working with. But yes, we're fully committed to working with international organizations and committed countries to work together on this. But I agree with the Danish minister that it's difficult to establish international standards at such an early age. That's why we started with the certification that we had, which was a European one.
Thank you very much. And now over to Kersti Berger, who also wanted to speak to this point.
Thank you. So it's the obvious point, but standardization is hugely important because hydrogen, development of hydrogen depends on traded markets or international markets in a way in which, for example, wind hasn't. A lot of wind production was for domestic consumption. So standardization is absolutely critical to ensure a market for hydrogen developers. So with that in mind, Scotland's position is I think also, let's work with what we have, but there's no reason why, an EU approach to standardization can't progress in twin tracks with wider global negotiations. But there is a risk, that if you wait for too long for the perfect system, it's not going to arrive in time anywhere near of what we need for the net zero transition.
Can I just ask whether new technologies offer some promising solutions on the issue of guarantee of origin and tracing? Because, of course, we often hear that blockchain is ideally suited to such a challenge. Anybody have a view about new technologies' role in all of this? Okay, not offhand. That's fine, because I have another question that I'm happy to post.
We've included blockchain in energy communities, but not yet blockchain in terms of certification. But we've included peer-to-peer settlement mechanisms in our law regarding energy communities and self-consumption, but not yet in terms of certification of hydrogen.
Thank you. Then I would like to move on to another, perhaps it's not necessarily a challenge, but it's something that is often discussed within the hydrogen community as an essential step that needs to be taken, namely moving the use of hydrogen into sectors where it hasn't been employed heretofore. And a couple of you have mentioned that. So what would you say as crucial prerequisites for that to happen, whether we talk about transport, shipping, or heating, housing? I know, Kjersti Berge, I mentioned that Scottish homes are going to be using this for heating and cooking. Maybe you want to say a word as well. I see Minister Jørgensen raising his hand, so I'll let you get us started, please, on that.
Would that be, was it Kjersti?
No, I'm going to ask Minister Jørgensen to start, and then I'll come over to you. Thanks.
I think different tools. One is there's no way around subsidies in the beginning of these processes. I think we need so much research and development, and we need it to be joint ventures between knowledge institutions, science community, and the private sector. Now, of course, we shouldn't make the same mistakes as was done decades ago in the fossil fuel sector, making it so dependent on subsidies that it was difficult to change and difficult to have cleaner energies compete with that. But that aside, we need to acknowledge that we need subsidies. Second thing I think is extremely important is regulation. Both we need to put away with the different challenges that are there now, the red tape that are there now, that basically has been necessary for a different type of economy that won't work for a hydrogen type economy. Just one example, for some of these e-fuels, you'll need to add carbon to the hydrogen. Good, well, in many places it's actually illegal to transport carbon across borders, so that needs to be changed. So there's so many things that you need to do. And the third point I would make is just we need to put a price on pollution. If we put a high price on carbon pollution, then of course the economy and the financing of Power-to-X technologies looks very much different.
Very much. Thank you. Kjersti Berge, I'll come to you.
Thank you. I very much agree with Minister Jørgensen that we need, support and subsidies, regulation, and a price on carbon as well. It's very interesting to hear from Portugal that they're already putting in CFD mechanisms to support hydrogen. So we have been very successful in Scotland and in the deed of the UK of using CFD mechanisms for offshore wind for wind deployment. So mechanisms like that have a key role to play. I think we've also also in some areas got work to do on demonstration and then quickly moving from demonstration to deployment. So you mentioned opportunities for hydrogen in heat. So in Scotland, about between 80 and 90% of our domestic housing is heated by gas. And we do see opportunities for hydrogen to be used in heat as well as industrial processes in Scotland. So we've currently got a project where we are trialling 100% hydrogen supply to about 300 households in Fife in Scotland. So I think demonstrating that to make sure that we technically understand what can be done and give people confidence what can actually be done is a really important component as well.
Thank you very much. And I believe that Minister Jobbé also wanted to add a word.
Yes, very briefly, it was mentioned already, but I think safety is very important. If we want to use hydrogen in new industries, I think we need to be sure that it's going to be safe. If we have a problem with safety, I think the impact that might have in the development of the industry can be huge. So I think safety is very important. For example, we, as Scotland is doing, we are trying to introduce increasingly green hydrogen into our gas grids. But we need to be technically, rigorous to make sure that the grids are ready and that people understand that this is safe. So safety, I think that is very important to introduce it into new sectors.
Thank you very much. And I believe Deputy Minister Galamba, you also wanted to add a point.
Yes, no, I'm answering directly to your question. How do we ensure that some sectors adopt hydrogen? That's the idea of our carbon CFD auctions. Basically, what we want to do is we will define a certain quantity of hydrogen consumption that we are willing to subsidize, and then the auction will allow those end users to choose those end users that require at each moment in time the smallest subsidy. Basically, that's what we're doing. So all end users can compete in the auction, and the auction will select those end users that require the smallest green premium in terms of adoption of green hydrogen. We believe that this is the way to attract those sectors, mainly heavy industry and heavy transportation, where hydrogen for us makes sense, but to do it competitively and at the lowest costs in terms of public resources. So that's the way that we're envisioning it, and we believe that this is the best way to ensure matching between production and consumption. So we will support producers in their capex investments, and then we will provide end users with the mechanism that will basically finance those years where the carbon price is not high enough to make hydrogen commercially viable. Of course, if carbon prices rise, then the subsidy will cease, because that's the advantage of a carbon CFD auction, is that it's not a feed-in. Basically, until carbon prices are high enough, there will be a payment. If carbon prices rise, the payment ceases. And we believe that this is the most efficient way to manage subsidies and to attract end users to this area.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for that. I believe that Minister Mesa also wanted to say a word.
Yes, thank you. Just to complement especially what Deputy Minister just said from Portugal. I think when we're talking about how to promote demand for hydrogen, we should also think about the policy mix, because we have a lot of incentives on the supply side, and a lot of them go through production of variable renewable energy. But when we think about the demand side, we're imposing taxes such as carbon tax. But I think it's important also to think about incentives for end users to make the switch and have an incentive to demand clean energy such as green hydrogen. So I think the policy mix has to be well balanced between subsidies or taxes, and a combination of both, and not only penalizing the consumption of certain fuels while incentivizing only the supply side.
Thank you very much. One last question, and it came in from the audience, and there's really no body from this region to address it, but I'm going to give it to the two Latin American voices on the panel, because the question is this: what is your opinion on North America's opportunities to become a green hydrogen export champion? So Chile and Colombia, are you looking at significant competition from the north, would you say, Monsieur Joubert? Minister Joubert?
We have, I'm not an expert on the US green hydrogen market, but we have a company that is developing a project in Chile, in Patagonia, with wind that's very, very competitive. It's a joint venture between local companies and German companies. And they're also looking at the US market. They think that there are certain areas, for example, in this case, Texas, in which the combination of solar irradiance and wind will allow them to produce electricity probably at around $20 to $25 per megawatt hour, a levelized cost. And that is very competitive to produce and eventually export green hydrogen. I think the local demand is enormous as well. And I think that the US, the whole climate change is changing very quickly in the last couple of months. So I think it will be, as somebody said previously, I think we are competing against one another, but more honestly, I think we are cooperating. We need to make this happen together. Some people talk about co-opetition, which is this mixture of cooperation and competition. And I think if a player and a country like the US invests heavily in this industry, it will accelerate its development. So I think that would be good news.
Thank you. I believe Minister Mesa also wanted to speak to this point, and then over to Kersty-Baga.
Sure. No, I agree with what Minister Joubert just said, and I think we could leverage some of the technological advancement that it's going to be possible with the new focus on climate change in the U.S. administration. But thinking about competition, I think we could also leverage our natural, competitive advantage in countries like Colombia. Even though, one of the main inputs for green hydrogen is variable renewable energy, because of our location, because we don't have seasons, even that variability can be more predictable in a country like ours. So obviously, I think that's one of the advantages that we have. There is a natural advantage, and we need to make sure that we use that in order to be more competitive in the production of green hydrogen.
Thank you very much. And let me go now to Kersty-Baga. You also wanted to say something to this point, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I just want to emphasise that, we've got huge ambitions for hydrogen in Scotland, but we don't see it as a competition. This is a market where we need critical mass. You see what happens to the price of solar when a country like China does it. So we need the US to be engaged in this. We need countries across the globe. At this stage, it's not a competition, because only by critical mass will we move quickly enough to deal with the safety issues, the cost issues, and the wide-scale deployment issues. I can't speak for North America, but we've been speaking quite a bit to the energy commissioners in California, and they are looking really, really carefully at hydrogen. I'm not sure to what extent they're looking at export, but like us, they actually use quite a lot of gas for their heating. So they're looking at potential for hydrogen in that areas as well as others. So we very much welcome the US as well as other big global players on the hydrogen stage, because we just need them.
Thank you very much. And we're simply going to say thank you and goodbye to this excellent panel looking at the future hydrogen economy. Many, many thanks to all of you, and utmost success in your endeavors.